Hi, everybody. I'm William Berger, author, lecturer, radio commentator, and avid reader of Tracee Dunblazier's writings. Very excited about the new book, Conquer Your Karmic Relationships, Heal Spiritual Trauma to Open Your Heart and Restore Your Soul. All right, to read a little bit, a passage that really resonated with me here right now. The Slayer's Pact. Face what's in front of you. All of us have things that make us uncomfortable, embarrassed, indignant, and fearful that we need to face in ourselves and in this world. We live in a society that would, more often than not, prefer us to avoid discomfort at all costs. It offers 1,000 different ways for us to medicate, confuse, or distract ourselves. Retraining our habit of obfuscation is a worthy opponent, one that will inevitably require a lot of attention if it is to be overcome. When facing the foibles and frailties of the human condition, take these things with you: humor, compassion, and honesty. You'll need them. This trip is often long, and you're going to run out of gas. That's where compassion and humor come in. Facing racism, bigotry, misogyny, and corruption take a special kind of integrity. But what about those topics that feel a little closer to home, like a fear of confrontation or a general inability to communicate how you feel? What about your difficulty with empathy or understanding other people's problems? How do you deal with your own personal losses and depression? Owning up to these things can be exhausting on all levels, but did you know that avoiding them will cost you so much more than weariness? Ignoring or dismissing your own values and disrespecting the values of others can only create conflict and strife in all facets of your life. Standing up for the wrongs that are being done and grieving the ones that have passed are the only ways forward. Social justice and self-governance, a global cry for healing. We are experiencing a unique time in the evolution of social justice and self-governance. The cataclysmic conflict emerging from all human demographics right now is indicative of the karma created from the multiple industrial revolutions that have occurred over the last 10,000 years on the planet. Every time a group of people has sought to explore and expand their borders, building under the guise of wanting a better and more efficient future, other groups of people have been subjugated, enslaved, and sometimes murdered in the name of that progress. Today, energy on the planet is processed by her inhabitants more quickly, and the impact of these revolutionary patterns appear instantly for some. The millions of people on the planet living with deep cultural wounds caused by war, enslavement, genocide, corruption, and victimization have no other option but to begin to restore themselves by breaking away from the tyrannical beliefs and insidious patterns of oppression that created the conditions they find themselves in. It is what we are seeing worldwide, a global cry for healing. It is through this lens that we must take a comprehensive look at how we police and govern ourselves personally and societally. Communicating about racism and bias. Listen, learn, and let go of shame. There are a few fundamental elements we must understand, accept, and forgive in order to communicate about racism and bias effectively. We are all racist or biased at some time, in one way or another, all of us. Usually, this is because we don't understand the deep cultural system of racism and bias that exists in the US and other places on the globe. Therefore, it's easy to overlook mistakes of racism and bias because they're considered normal by societal standards. If you live here in America, we know that you live in a system of racism and bias promoted by socioeconomic status, skin color, and gender. No matter your beliefs, our white and male-dominated society still generates a spoken and unspoken hierarchy through which people of color are demoralized, diminished, and invalidated, openly or in secret, in all walks of life. If you are resistant to hearing that statement, it's more than likely you benefit in some way from it. It makes no difference if you participate directly or indirectly. The goal here is not to judge any of us for this quagmire of unprocessed grief, fear, and systemic oppression we find ourselves in. The goal is to accept that it exists and to begin to make inroads in repairing or changing the system until it recognizes all of us equally. The white male-dominated system is evident in politics and government, education and standardized testing, gender discrimination for equal pay, and sexual power. Although many of the younger generation have a shifting relationship to the world they live in and don't feel that other people control their destiny, many of us are left to overcome the emotional reality of transcending some sort of sexual, gender, or cultural bias. While the 116th Congress of the United States is the most diverse in history, the mix still favors white Christian men. Out of the 535 members of Congress, women and minorities each currently represent less than 25% of the total. For years, statistics show a strong disparity in the results of standardized testing based on socioeconomic status and opportunity of different cultures, in addition to the tests themselves showing some form of bias based on opportunities to which not all children are exposed. And in many places, most notably Hollywood and the world of professional sports, women are still fighting for equal pay in spite of, and in some cases, generating more sales. In addition, the hashtag #MeToo movement has highlighted a long-needed change to the sexual power dynamic in the workplace. While it will take generations to reconcile the ingrained dynamics of racism and gender bias for everyone, we must find the courage and the language to begin to acknowledge racial, cultural, and gender miseducation and ignorance openly and honestly every time we witness it. We must learn to master our guilt, shame, and anger pertaining to these biases. It's important to be receptive and willing to trust ourselves to begin the work of having the necessary conversations that create compassion. Learning to listen, hear, and validate another's understanding by accepting the needed re-education without defense and with gratitude. This dynamic will inevitably become part of our everyday norm. Until we have a baseline of cultural understanding about the nuances of racism and bigotry, for all of us living in today's world, we cannot begin to comprehend the complexities of individual karma that creates deeply intricate and unique viewpoints on racism held by each individual. Only through bringing out and acknowledging our similarities will we begin to cultivate the trust required to live honestly, so we may all grieve for our collective cultural scars. It's imperative to know another person's experience by hearing it from their perspective. Helping others to become clear that what is normal languaging for some is diminishing for others isn't rude. It's an opportunity for all of us to show respect, compassion, and a willingness to understand the experiences of everyone with whom we share this planet. That was on page 194, and I found that really important for me right now in this moment, personally and historically and every other way, professionally. In my work as a music commentator, sometimes I don't want to have to talk about these things, both my role in them on sides of oppressor and victim, both. But, and I am constantly making this point to people, to not talk about it is a political choice, and it's also what this passage is bringing out. It's a personal choice and not a good one. not a choice toward healing. I love the way this passage draws out the how the societal problem that we're all talking about right now is a macrocosmic version of grief and scars that we all carry within each of us on a grand scale. They're the same. And when to refuse to talk about it is a choice toward not healing, toward not facing everything and recover, as they say. Um, and I just think that's a point that needs to be made repeatedly and in many different ways for each one of us. All the societal shock and wrenching self-reflection is part of a communal psychological and spiritual process. And I also think we can do it. We can do it without war. We can do it without hating each other. We can find, and that's in here, the answer is in the language that we use, whether that's musical or something else. And I'm going to keep rereading this like you do with like one does with all sort of healing literature. It's not something you read once. It's something you return to like a song to sing over and over again. So I got a lot out of that. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning into this, just to hear a bit of this passage from Conquer Your Karmic Relationships, Heal Spiritual Trauma to Open Your Heart and Restore Your Soul by Tracee Dunblazier.